He told me just a few days before that something Houdini said that was, it will either be fate or my foolishness that kills me.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be discussing 10 magicians who died while performing magic tricks.
But that night, March 23, 1918, his two biggest illusions failed spectacularly.
For this video, we'll be going over the tragic stories behind individuals who passed away while attempting to perform feats of prestidigitation. Were you aware of any of these stories? Let us know in the comments. Chanchal Lahiri, a.k.a. Jadugar Mandrake.
In a turbulent river, it will be very hard to open the knots and locks, but I will open them. And if I do that, it's magic. If not, then it's tragic.
The specter of famed illusionist Harry Houdini still looms large over the world of magic. This perhaps explains why Indian magician Chanchal Lahiri attempted this dangerous stunt back in 2019. Known by his stage name Jadugar Mandrake, Lahiri was attempting a daring underwater escape. He was chained, blindfolded, and placed into a padlock cage. The cage was then lowered into the Hooghly River while spectators watched and waited. Unfortunately, Lahiri failed his attempt despite succeeding in similar stunts in the past. His body was later recovered, still tied not far from the site of his initial drop into the water. William Ellsworth Robinson, a.k.a. Chung Ling Soo. It's certainly problematic by today's standards to learn how William Ellsworth Robinson, like other performers during the vaudeville era, pretended to be a different race in order to cultivate a gimmick. Robinson went to egregious lengths to make people believe he was a Chinese man and worked tirelessly to keep his real identity a secret right up until his death. His condemned to death by the boxers illusion was meant to showcase Robinson stopping bullets that were fired by an assistant. However, the means by which Robinson and his crew rigged the weapons eventually allowed for unburned gunpowder to ignite, expelling a bullet that struck the magician in his chest. He would die from his wounds the following morning.
For 18 years, the magician had performed in silence or spoken through a Chinese interpreter. But on the night of his death, theater-goers heard him speak English with an American accent. As Chung Ling Soo fell, he called out, "Oh my God, something's happened. Lower the curtain."
P.C. Sorkar. Born in 1913, here was a man who would eventually go on to assume the moniker P.C. Sorkar, the world's greatest magician. The title was something of a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Sorkar did indeed enjoy a thriving career as one of India's most popular illusionists. Sorkar was approaching 60 and going against the advice of physicians when he embarked upon a long tour of Japan. It proved to be his last, as Sorkar succumbed to a heart attack on January 6, 1971 at the age of 57. It's unclear whether it was the stress of traveling or something during a show that did in Sorkar, but the performer collapsed almost immediately after the end of a stage performance in Hokkaido, Japan. Jeff Rayburn Hopper. Experience and endless rehearsal can be an integral aspect of a magician's training. Unfortunately, an aspiring enchanter by the name of Jeff Rayburn Hopper suffered a fatal accident while preparing for an upcoming performance. A New York Times article dated from the 8th of July, 1984 details how Hopper was rehearsing a trick that saw him practicing in Indiana's Winona Lake. The trick was to see Hopper escape from a chained position in handcuffs underwater. And though he was reportedly successful in completing part of the trick, he drowned before making it back to shore. He was only 23. Johan Moller, a.k.a. Balabrega. Sometimes it's not the trick that goes wrong, but some kind of horrible malfunction on stage. This is what unfortunately happened to Swedish magician Johan Muller. Muller went under the stage name Balabrega and became famous during the vaudeville era with a trick that involved assistants dressed as moths.
Oh my God!
These moths would dance to flames produced by Balabrega via a gas that he'd become trained to safely navigate. It all went wrong, however, during a tour of South America and a performance in Brazil. The gas Balabrega usually used for his performances couldn't be accommodated and was instead replaced by the highly flammable acetylene. An explosion was triggered, killing him and his assistant. Charles Rowan, a.k.a. Carr the Magician. Charles Rowan was another magician who sought to emulate the enduring influence of Harry Houdini. He did this by successfully navigating escapes from straitjackets under the moniker of Carr the Magician. One of his most popular tricks involved escaping from a straitjacket in the nick of time in order to move out of the way of an oncoming car. A performance in South Africa proved fatal, however, when this one straitjacket was giving Rowan some trouble. The incident proved so stressful to the magician that he suffered a heart attack while attempting his escape. Carr the Magician was then horrifically struck by the car barreling in his direction. Royden Joseph Gilbert Raison de la Genesta. Escape tricks, as we've learned, can often prove fatal with only the slightest of miscalculations. Tragedy struck Kentucky-born sorcerer Royden Joseph Gilbert Raison de la Genesta on November 9, 1930. Genesta was another magician who thrilled audiences during the vaudeville era with wildly dangerous and exciting escapes. This performance was supposed to see Genesta emerge from a milk container filled with water. This wasn't an original idea of Genesta's, but rather an homage to, you guessed it, Harry Houdini. Unfortunately, a dent in the milk can was discovered only too late, and it prevented Genesta's only escape route. Because he performed from behind a curtain, no one knew anything was wrong until he was found drowned at the scene. Madame Dolinsky. It certainly takes nerves of steel to attempt the bullet trick. This is a legendary magic stunt that sees a performer either catching or avoiding a bullet that's fired at them on stage. Madame Dolinsky worked together with her husband as a couples act and performed the stunt way back in 1820. A firing squad was reportedly set up to fire the bullets at the pair, but somehow a live round was inserted into one of the guns. The bullet hit Madame Dolinsky in the abdomen. She allegedly lived a couple of days with the bullet lodged inside of her, before finally succumbing to her wounds. Sigmund Neuberger, a.k.a. the Great Lafayette. The vaudeville era comes up again and again with our research for this topic, which is unsurprising given that this time period brought something of a boom for many up-and-coming magicians seeking to make their mark. Sigmund Neuberger was one such illusionist, a popular and successful practitioner of prestidigitation that went under the moniker of the Great Lafayette. Neuberger thrilled audiences for years with riveting stunts and was handsomely paid for his work. However, a 1911 performance killed the Great Lafayette when a fire accidentally broke out during one of his most famous illusions, the Lion's Bride. There were a number of casualties, including Lafayette himself, who went back into the burning building in an attempt to save his horse. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Joseph Burris, a.k.a. Amazing Joe. An LA Times article from 1990 details the harrowing events that signified the end of a magician's early career. Joseph Burris idolized Harry Houdini and tried to impress an amusement park crowd on Halloween night with a Houdini-inspired daring escape attempt. Burris, who went by the moniker of Amazing Joe, had in the past successfully navigated a stunt where he escaped from a see-through coffin that was covered in dirt. When he tried to perform it again that night, however, the dirt ended up mixed with wet cement. As you might be thinking, the cement proved too heavy for the glass coffin.
Joe never calculated the strength of the box, nor the weight of the concrete.
Perfect!
It eventually cracked the lid and, to the horror of many, buried Burris alive.
But in an eerie twist of fate, the Amazing Joe Burris lost his life exactly 64 Halloweens from the day Houdini died. Burris's stunt, buried alive, became all too real.